What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a book review of Another Kingdom by Andrew Klavan. Now, before we dive into the review, let's first go over what is this book about. Austin Lively is a struggling, disillusioned screenwriter whose life is suddenly changed forever when he opens a door and is unwittingly transported to a fantastical medieval realm. Austin finds himself wielding a bloody dagger while standing over a very beautiful and very dead woman. Bewildered and confused, he is seized by castle guards and thrown in a dungeon. Just when he begins to fear the worst, he is suddenly transported back to reality in LA. Desperate for answers, he sets out to find them and discovers that the mystery can only be unlocked by a strange piece of fiction that holds the truth about the magical kingdom. But he isn't the only person searching for the missing manuscript, and his rivals will stop at nothing to get it first. Stuck between dual realities, charged for a murder he doesn't recall in one, and running from a maniacal billionaire who's determined to kill him in another, Austin's monotonous life has become an epic adventure of magic, murder, and political intrigue in both the New Republic of Galiana and the streets of Los Angeles, California. Okay, guys, so if you're new to the channel, the way that I normally break down my reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things about the book that I enjoyed, the bad being the things that I didn't care so much for, and these are preferential things, maybe a character I didn't like, maybe the writing style, or maybe the pacing of the book. But then I go into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up. And I break this down into 5 categories. But before we get into that, let's first go over the good. So what were some things about Another Kingdom that I enjoyed? Man, the pacing is fantastic. This is one of the best paced books that I have ever read. Andrew Klavan does such a phenomenal job of bouncing back and forth between the two different realities. So obviously, you start out in LA, and then right when things maybe seem like they're getting a little bit stagnant, or they're just on the cusp of being stagnant, we are immediately transported back to Galiana. And in a very similar fashion, when things really start picking up and you think, like, how's he going to get out of this? Immediately, we are thrown back, thrust back into Los Angeles, California. And so he did such a fantastic job of going back and forth between the two realities. But more than just going back and forth, it's when. He timed everything perfectly. Now you can tell that this is not a very long book. I think the whole book is like 300 pages, like right at 300 pages. And it is breakneck speed. I think the entire book takes place in a matter of about 3 or 4 days. So the pacing to me is flawless. The characters are great. I would say there's nothing that is extremely unique about the characters, with the exception of our main character, Austin Lively. So Austin's character is a screenwriter who sold a script, but the script got greenlit for production, but never took off. And so there's a line in this book that I absolutely love where he says, I wish that I was a has-been, but I'm actually a never was. That was so well articulated, and you can see that he's struggling. He's struggling with his purpose in life, and then he is just thrust into this other kingdom. See what I did there? And he's trying to wrestle with things in his own personal life, and then what he has been thrown into in this other world. But one of the best things about this book is the plot, because there are numerous subplots within this book. So what I mean is, like, if you were to categorize this book, I would say that it is classified as fantasy. And as a matter of fact, I believe it is classified as fantasy, but it's not just that. It's a murder mystery story. It's a thriller. It's has political intrigue. It's a crime novel. Yes, it is fantastical, but there's also some romance in there. So there's a ton that is packed into this short book. And by short, I mean short by epic fantasy reader standards. So I think there's something in here for everybody to like, so long as you're okay with that portal fantasy element. But even if you're not a big fan of fantasy, I think that there's a lot here to like. So this is actually a novel that I'm going to start recommending to people to get into fantasy. For somebody that's like wizards and dragons and swords and stuff, I'm not interested in that. And it's like, really? Because the Game of Thrones TV show is like the most popular TV show of all time, and everybody from all different backgrounds absolutely loved that show. So clearly people do like fantasy. They just have to be invested in the story. And so I think this is going to be one of those books that I start recommending to people to not only get into fantasy, but to get into reading altogether. This is one of those books that I think will work for a lot of people. So the pacing is great. The characters are pretty good. Mainly Austin's character, if I'm just being extremely forthcoming. He was the most intriguing. The rest were kind of okay. And there is a side character, sort of the antagonist of the story, was extremely interesting as well. And then the plot and all of the genre blending that is in this book is just on a different level altogether. So now let's jump into the bad. So what were some things about this book that I didn't enjoy? And really preferentially, I don't think there was a lot in here. As a matter of fact, I'm doing this off the cuff. I can't really think of anything that I didn't enjoy about this book. This was a book that I kept finding myself wanting to go back to, wanting to pick back up. I was like, I got to get back into this book. I would be trying to plow through my day-to-day tasks, some of my honey-do lists or whatever. I'd be trying to plow through those things quickly so that I could get back into this book because it is so good. So as far as the bad goes, I'm talking more about the good. So I didn't really find anything in here that I didn't enjoy preferentially, aside from some things that I will go into in just a moment. But as far as like the writing style, the characters, the plot, I think this was a 10 out of 10. So this brings me to the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up. And I break this down into 5 categories and I rate them out of 10, starting with violence and brutality. So for violence and brutality, I'm going to give this a 7. I would say it's just a little bit above average as far as an adult fantasy book goes. There are a couple of more violent and brutal moments, but overall, even though the premise of the book sounds pretty bloody, there's not a whole lot in here. There are a few instances where it can get a little more bleak, a little more gruesome. There are some characters that don't make it, and it describes in detail what these characters went through. But I don't think it's something that's going to hold somebody back, just as far as the violence and brutality goes. I think you're going to find things that are much more violent, much more brutal, and in most adult fantasy books, especially nowadays. So I would say, if you want me to compare it to something else, I would say it's on par with John Gwynne as far as the violence and brutality goes. I don't think it's more intense or less intense. I think the two are pretty close. So if you've read John Gwynne and you're fine with the violence and brutality in there, I think you'll be fine with this here. Category 2 is going to be sexually explicit content. And for sexually explicit content, I'm going to give this a 2. So I didn't see anything in here that was really sexually explicit. There were a couple of mentions of some extramarital relationships. There was one scene where our main character had a fade to black scene. It's the best way that I can articulate it in a politically correct manner, but I don't think it was like explicit. So it does mention some things, but it is very fade to black in that sense. There was a couple of mentions of a villain who was thinking about committing assault towards a young lady. But again, when I'm talking about sexually explicit things, I would say this is in the realm of PG, maybe PG-13, but it does not step over the line into the rated R area. Category 3 is going to be language. Now for language, I'm going to give this a 7. You could probably push this up to an 8 if, just depending on the individual. It's pretty heavy on the language at times. I would say it's not as bad as The Martian as far as the frequency of the language that is used, but I will say that the same language is used as far as which words the author chose. So, this is an adult book. I'm not excusing it or justifying it. I'm just trying to be transparent with you guys and let you know it is in here. Most of the types of language that you could think of that would be in your PG-13 movie, maybe crossing over into the R category just because of the level of frequency and intensity. So I would say it's a 7. You could push it up to an 8, but personally, I thought it was a 7. There were times where it was really in your face. It was supposed to be. It was in those times of emotional highs and lows. So could the language hold a Christian back from picking it up? Quite possibly. It's just going to depend on you, the reader. So I'm going to say, if you want me to give it like a movie rating, it's PG-13 at least, and it probably could dip its toes into rated R. So it's for me personally, I think it's somewhere between Guardians of the Galaxy and Pulp Fiction. It's somewhere kind of right in the sweet spot of those two, if that gives you any kind of idea of what to expect. So category 4 is going to be gratuitous inclusions. Now, again, these are inclusive things that are shoehorned into the book that don't really pertain to the story, that are, in my opinion, gratuitous. That's the whole point of it, because you can have inclusion in those kinds of things without being gratuitous in nature. And so for this, I'm going to give it a 2. Overall, I would say it's not in here, especially if you guys know the author, Andrew Klavan. If you know his background, he is one of the commentators on the Daily Wire. That alone keeps some people from picking it up. But I would say that there is diversity here, but it is predominantly because of the geographic location of being in LA. So just again, to be transparent with you guys, there is a lesbian character in the book. She's a side character. She's not mentioned very often, but for some people, just the fact that there's somebody in that community in the work holds them back. I would say I didn't think it was gratuitous because it made sense for this book in particular. It made sense as far as adding tension to the story, but it was never glorified. There was never any like virtue signaling or anything like that. And you guys know that I'm pretty sensitive to these gratuitous inclusions. I'm fed up with it. It's kind of the reason why I started the channel, and I didn't find it affronting. The character was there for a reason. Now, could that character have been there without being a lesbian? Probably, but I certainly think it gives you a better picture of what LA and these professional artists, like sort of their circles, typically look like. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's gratuitous. Maybe you would, but was it unnecessary? Maybe. But I didn't find it affronting or offensive in any way, if that tells you anything. And the final category is going to be dark themes. Now, for dark themes, I also include heavy themes. These are the things that kind of stick with you, that you wrestle with internally. Maybe sometimes it's difficult for you to go to sleep at night, or you don't want to read this right before bed, those kind of things. And for dark themes, I'm going to give this a 3. I don't think they're really in here. I think that there's some weightier things that go on as far as how people have such a low value of life. That could bother you. People were just going through and ending people's lives willy-nilly with no remorse. So maybe that could weigh on you a little bit. I don't think so, but there were a couple of things in here where it made the story grittier. And it also made it more realistic, in my opinion. So I thought Andrew Klavan did an excellent job of blending reality and fantasy. Obviously, this is exactly what this cover is conveying here, right? It's a blending of those two things. So I would say, as far as the dark themes or the heavy themes go, I put it at a 3 because there's some real things that the character has to wrestle with, and those real things carry over from each world that he's in, and he's experiencing heavy themes and in each world, and those things bleed into each other. So it's really him wrestling with these things, but do I think there's anything in here that's going to hold a Christian back from picking it up? I don't think so. And so the final question is, would I recommend it to a Christian? And the answer is yes, I would. It's going to depend on the individual, though. I certainly think that this book would probably work better for men than women. I'm not saying that women won't enjoy it or can't enjoy it, but you are reading first person from a male perspective. And for me personally, I typically prefer those kinds of stories. It's easier for me to have empathy for the character. I can see myself in their shoes, so to speak. But again, would I recommend it to a Christian? Yeah, I would. I wouldn't recommend it to a young reader. It would have to be an adult reader. It would have to be somebody that I don't think is extremely easily influenced by the entertainment that they consume, because there's some things in here that you wrestle with the main character. It sounds like a mark against the work. It isn't. It's just me saying, this is the kind of book that I was looking for, and that I like, not that I would ever write a book, but if I were to write a book, it would be something in this vein, because most of the time when we hear of these fantasy books, we hear about like farm boy to hero kind of thing, or the Dragon Rider fantasies and stuff. But this is sort of like your average Joe, probably below average Joe in his 30s, who's not content with his professional life and he becomes the chosen one. So it's a nice twist on the chosen one trope, because, you know, he's living this mundane life, this corporate life, and now he is thrust into this fantasy world. So, you know, when people use the term Harry Potter for adults, they use that all the time. I think it's literally on the back of Ready Player One and many, many other books. But I would say that this felt the most like Harry Potter for adults for me personally, because it was this adult that was living this average life, maybe below average life, and was very discontent, had a lot of things going wrong. And then he's called to action to be this hero in this fantasy world. So I absolutely loved it. I think a lot of people will. Do I think this book's going to work for everybody? No, I don't. But it's rare that I think that a book will work for everybody, but this book really worked for me. So would I recommend it to a Christian? I would, but it's going to take some one-on-one discussion trying to figure out what your likes, dislikes, and convictions are before I can recommend it wholeheartedly to you. So overall, guys, I absolutely loved Another Kingdom by Andrew Klavan. I am currently reading The Nightmare Feast at the time of recording this. I'm having a great time with it. It is book 2 in this trilogy. Andrew Klavan is a fantastic author. He has really mastered his craft. And this is just the first book that I've read of his. So I'm really looking forward to diving into more of his works, because he writes a lot of crime thrillers and murder mysteries and some political novels and things. So he's got a lot in his catalog for pretty much anybody. So I absolutely love this book. And I know that's like the 5th time that I've said that, but I did. I love this book. And at the time of recording this, this is so far book of the year for me, just because the pacing was so good. The story was compelling. I could really empathize with the characters, and it wasn't one note. There was all kinds of things that was really steeped into this novel. So it really worked for me, and it checked all of the boxes. So I loved it. So guys, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about Another Kingdom by Andrew Klavan. Guys, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It does help the channel out. But more than anything, please share these videos with your Christian brothers and sisters who love to read, because it is my goal with this channel to be a good resource to my other brothers and sisters, so that maybe we can spend our time, money, and energy a little more wisely on things that honor the Lord. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.